It was good, Josh, man. The Bigga P, and just want to talk about some of the fights that just happened today. But first, I want to talk about a fight that happened last week or so. The Stevenson versus Fanfara fight. Pretty much as we know that Stevenson's been streaking as of late. He hasn't been distance in pretty much was it almost in 7 years, and last year alone he scored 4 knockdowns. He stopped Chad in 1 round, then he stopped Cloud, first person to actually stop Cloud, and then he faces Boogeyman Darnell Boone, and then ended up with facing with a Tony Bayu in his 4 fights. So pretty much he's been riding on a high wave of fights. So when the Fanfare fight was announced, I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is probably gonna be another fight. Stevenson just, this will be Stevenson's little Showtime debut. He's gonna put on a show, and he's gonna knock Fanfare out, probably within the mid rounds. And I was wrong. I was very wrong about what happened about that fight. Um, Although more wrong is because I underrated how tough Fanfare really was. Because in the early rounds, Stevenson was really giving it to him. Like in the first, and I think the first and the fourth rounds, he dropped him. I didn't think Fanfare would actually, was that enough to actually do, was that tough to actually would be able to take his power. But the tide slowly started turning in the mid rounds. And then Stevenson got tired of throwing all those heavy shots that he was throwing, and his hands started coming down, especially his left hand, keeping it real low. And then in the ninth round, Fanfare found his chin. Now Stevenson was in a whole world of trouble after that knockdown. I think in fact that was Fanfare. If Fanfare was gonna win that fight, it was probably gonna be in that round. But Stevenson's body work and the punishment he was doling out earlier, I think, did its work in terms of Fanfare was a little gassed, so to speak, to take advantage of that. And the fight went on where Stevenson didn't really look as dominant as he was before, although he was still winning the rounds after that. But and he did win. He did win the fight, and deservedly so. But that's probably not the best debut someone would actually have going to a rival network. Now everyone's saying, okay, Stevenson exposed. No, he wasn't. Stevenson wasn't exposed. Stevenson fights the way he always fought. Like I said, Stevenson has only one loss, and that's to Darnell Boone, and that's mostly if you see the little grainy clip on YouTube. You could see pretty much how he lost. It was more or less Boone threw a double jab. Stevenson's hands were low, and Stevenson caught him. Stevenson got caught with an overhand right. That's what happened. Afterwards, so after the fight, it was more or less Stevenson. Everyone says, "Oh, Stevenson got exposed." No, Stevenson wasn't exposed. He got winded clearly from throwing the shots he was throwing. The chin was always going to be suspect. The hands were low. That's why he got caught. There was nothing there that said, he was exposed. From that, it was just more or less Fanfare was tough. Was tough enough to take the beating that he took, even after all those body shots he was taking, and still able to, drop him. And that was the most underrated part of that fight. So no, I guess we have our doubts. So pretty much it's going to be Stevenson versus Hopkins, most likely in the fall. And now it will pretty much come to will B-Hop does have enough guile and enough boxing ability to hold off a younger fighter. And it's funny when you say younger fighter because Stevenson is 36, he's about 36, 37 years old. He's not that much younger than Bernard Hopkins. Well, I can't really say no. I'm lying. Stevenson is old for a fighter himself, but he's not. But he's still, a much younger, physically fresher fighter than B-Hop. But it'll be an interesting fight. I'm still gonna pick Stevenson mostly because I don't think B-Hop has a little trouble. Old B-Hop has a little trouble with athletic fighters who have a little bit of power or a little bit of boxing skill. So yeah, it'll definitely be a fight I'm waiting on, and I'll definitely be anticipating. Now on to the fights from today. What I want to say first off, the HBO I think really dropped the ball in terms of choosing what fights they wanted to air. Mostly because of mostly because of the Macau card. The Macau card was actually pretty good. I was watching it on a stream at the barber shop. My barber hooked it up. So as I was waiting for my haircut, I was watching the Top Rank stream, and they had some really good fights. The Gradovich fight, um, Gradovich has slowly turned into one of my favorite fighters. I like watching them I like watching them operate. I'm always a fan of a good volume puncher that knows how to dole out punishment. And and then they had the Walter Starchinian fight, in which Walters, did what he did and knocked out Vic brutally. Vic should really start thinking about retirement because he's getting old and he's not changing the style of fighting. And he seems to get caught with the same punch over and over again. That left hook, every single time, left hook wobbles him, knocks him out. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. Just Vic doesn't look like the type of person to actually change his style of fighting, but he probably should start thinking about retirement. Now, the first fight that I caught from the fights was the Donaire versus Vetyeka fight. Now, this fight could have been something. I had a feeling it would have been, but the headbutting early, although I was very suspicious though on what actually opened that cut over Donaire's right eye. Or was it right eye or was it left eye? I forget. But look from because pretty much it looked like it was probably a jab that opened it up and not a headbutt. I didn't think it was a headbutt that opened it, and even when I looked at the multiple replays, it didn't even look like a headbutt to me. Um, but whatever it was bad, and since it was so early in the fight, it was gonna be one of those fights where it's gonna be it was either a no contest was coming up or Donaire was gonna try to tough it out. Um, and it continued. The headbutting continued into the second round, and then although Vetyeka was actually hitting him with some absolute, was starting to back Donaire up with some shots. The same thing in the third round, but in the fourth round, I think this is where Donaire's power came into play when one left hook sent him crashing to the canvas. Vetyeka showed a lot of guts getting up, bravery getting up from the hook because it was a pretty brutal left hook. But the unfortunate thing is how the fight ended because it seemed like to me that Donaire was actually fighting only to make until they were sure they got enough rounds in the bag or it wasn't close. So they were ahead. So if he was ahead, so let's go to the cards. And I hate to see a fight won that way, especially in a four round technical decision. I really hate it. If they were gonna actually pull some shit like that, I would rather have them go at least 6 rounds or something like that. Um, but it seemed like they were just fighting to get to the 4 rounds, and then just to make sure that Donaire was up on the cards before they stopped the fight. And I don't like to see a title won that way, not in the least. So I know Donaire was talking about, he'll give Vetyeka a rematch, and hopefully he does, because like I said, that fight was probably shaping up to be something. Donaire did look good, make no mistake about it, but I think once, and this is pretty much similar to the radio fight. Once he picked up that injury, it seemed like he just did not want to fight anymore. And in this particular case, because it was so early in the fight, he wouldn't win the title, and it would be no contest, and Vetyeka would still remain champion. So I just really hated seeing I just really hated seeing the title being lost that way. So Donaire continues, and like I said, and hopefully I do see the rematch, and hopefully it goes. It ends in a more proper fashion, other than a clash of heads, or a jab that was on the inside that no one really saw. Whatever. Um, and then we had the card in England, the Carl Froch-George George Groves card. That card wasn't as great, so to say. Although the fights ended in a knockout, all the fights ended in a knockout, but the fights themselves were not that great to watch. Jamie McConnell, you know, was found himself in a little bit of a firefight before he ended things nicely with a beautiful left hook. You know, Anthony Joshua ended his fight in the first round. Kevin Mitchell ended his. Kevin Mitchell was actually getting, I was getting beaten, and he came back and roared to life and stopped him in the 11th round. Although that stoppage might have been a little bit suspect because dude got to his feet and he looked ready to go, but referee just stopped it as he was moving back and forth. I didn't know what was going on, and James DeGale um, pretty much wiped out and overmatched Gonzalez in 4 rounds. Which brings us to the main event. I was highly anticipating this fight more than anything since their fight last year. Because the first fight, it was really nothing to me. I thought it was just a standard little defense for Froch to move on to bigger fighter things. And it turned out, he was literally fighting. It turned out to be an absolute like slugfest, which was ruined by by a bad referee. So this time around, they got an American referee for this fight. And pretty much in the end, in this fight, what was different from this fight is the firefight was not there in the early rounds. It was more or less a jabbing contest. A jabbing contest that was actually won by Groves. Groves pretty much, I think, won the first 4 rounds just off his jab and landing the occasional right hand. And it seemed like Froch at first was just a little nervous. I don't know if he was just nervous or tense, but he wasn't fighting how he usually fights. He was just I don't know whether to me I thought he was just nervous, but as the fight played out, Froch got a little braver, and he attacked Groves on the rope and then started landing the body work for the fight, and then but the one thing that Froch does that I wouldn't say that frustrates me, but it makes me shake my head is the fact that he'll get caught with the same punch over and over and over again. In this case for Groves, it was the right hand, and he was getting caught with it. And it was getting to the point where I'm thinking Froch was going to again walk into a right hand, because pretty much because Froch isn't. Froch is a good. Is pretty much a good fighter, but he's not. He was not. But his defensive liabilities to the fact where he squares up too much after a shot, or he doesn't, or he's not athletic enough to actually, to move his head back, so he doesn't get hit with that right hand over and over again. And then pretty much he just relies on his punch resistance and his chin for him to absorb another shot. But as the fight continued, Carl started landing the body work and started roughing up on the ropes. And I was waiting because Groves had a lot of opportunities to actually counter him. Because although Groves' hands were low, so was Froch, and I didn't think Froch, and like I said, I didn't think Froch, had the superior hand speed. The left hook was there for Groves to land, but it seemed like he was just more concerned about just landing a right hand. And then the ending came in round 8, where Groves pretty much blocked the left hand and dropped his left hand, and then Froch absolutely just crashed an overhand right over it, right on the jaw, out cold. That was a beautiful knockout, absolutely brutal knockout. To Groves' credit, I was surprised that he actually managed to attempt to get to his feet. Although the referee stopped it after he saw how the leg was folded. Luckily, I don't think there's no leg injury, but the fact that he still managed to get to his feet, try to get to his feet, was still impressive for me, because a shot like that on a normal fighter, that shot should have probably knocked him completely cold. He was out, but he should have stayed down for a little bit more than that. So once again, Froch pretty much proved that the first fight wasn't a fluke, and put a exclamation point on the whole rivalry. And most likely now, Froch is probably moving on to. I mean, he's getting up there. He's 37, so most likely he's probably looking for a cash out fight. Be it if it's gonna be Chavez Jr. or Martinez or Bigga. Although Bika's not really a cash out fight. He put. He'll probably have to be put to work facing Bigga. Um, so yeah, Froch continues. I mean, continues to do his thing and. Um, continue to try to look for a big fight. And as for Groves, for a guy who has probably 16, 17 pro fights, I mean, these fights will just do him some good. Um, I do believe that Groves himself will eventually pick up a title at some point in his career. Um, he's a good fighter, a good puncher. Guys got to tighten up a couple things. And I mean, like I said, facing going was it 16, 17 rounds with Carl Froch, and actually being up on the cards on probably both of those fights before just losing. Those are the best lessons a young fighter can actually have. So, I mean, he'll be back and he'll be back, better than ever. And like I said, I do believe that he'll actually pick up a title in the near future. So those are my thoughts for today's fights. I know HBO2 or HBO Latino is going to have a couple more fights later tonight at midnight. Um, we'll see. It depends if I'm even around at that time or if I'm going to be up or if I actually stay up. If I don't pass out on my couch, if I don't go anywhere to catch those fights. So, and then next week is the Miguel Cotto Sergio Martinez fight, which I can't wait for. Should be a good card. Although Top Rank needs to do a better job, at least get one notable fighter, at least for their co-main events, for a co-main event. So, but anyway, I'll probably we'll talk about that next week. So until then, all right, peace.